Hey guys, in this video I'm going to share with you a few of the ways that I'm dealing with procrastination, and it's something that I deal with quite regularly, and I like to sort of refer to a few of these things whenever I'm feeling like I'm about to procrastinate. So one of the first things is journaling and using the daily log. So I find that just getting into the habit of starting the day off with writing in the daily log is gets my mind into sort of the right state. So some of the questions that I might ask myself will include stuff like, how am I feeling? What is it that I actually feel like doing? Maybe I feel like reading a book. Maybe I feel like listening to a podcast. Whatever it is, just write it down. Whatever those thoughts are as well, write those things down. And when you are doing these things, you get yourself into this active mode where you're sort of putting your mind into a focused state. And once you get into this flow and things are coming out, so maybe I'm like, I feel like reading, seeking wisdom and learning more about Charles Darwin and how he was taking notes. He was a very prolific note taker, which apparently was a big reason for how he discovered evolution generally. So, what's the environment like? How is it? Does it feel conducive for thinking, for working? Is there anything that you can do to change that environment? Maybe, like some settings will help you be more productive and other settings less. So maybe you prefer very crowded environments, very noisy environments, maybe you prefer very quiet ones. So these are things that you can write about. And just talking about writing generally, Luhmann once said that writing is not the outcome of thinking, but rather it's the medium with which thinking takes place. So I think writing as a tool generally is just very effective for gathering your thoughts and also for getting yourself into a productive state of mind. The second thing is thinking about all the ways with which you tend to procrastinate. So when you're writing in your journal about how you're feeling, all these things, this will come out. But my list includes stuff like watching Netflix, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, emails. They put you into this reactive state. Any messaging apps like Messenger, WhatsApp, and as well as the Instagram messaging feature, they will also get me into a different mindset and will take me away from whatever it is that I want to do. Eating heavy food. After heavy food, I feel like I'm going into a slump and I feel like I'll lose energy and I really just don't feel like doing anything after having heavy food. So once you figure out sort of all the things that you should avoid, I think it's useful just to keep those in mind so that when you are feeling like you want to procrastinate, that you can keep a mental note to avoid those things. And just to make sure that you stay away from them, because once you sort of get into it, then it's harder, then you have to exercise more will to try and stop doing those things. So it's better just to avoid those things in the first place, and you won't need to exert as much effort to avoid those things than once you're actually in the loop. And then, so once you start a series on Netflix or once you start getting into emails, then you have to kind of remind yourself to, oh wait, I'm getting into this sort of loop that it doesn't, that really makes things kind of just worse and consumes more energy to stop doing those things. The third thing is to ask yourself the question, how can I make this easy? So what's the smallest possible thing that you can do to get started? So one thing might be that, okay, if you need to write a book, then let's say that you're really procrastinating this book, and what's the smallest possible thing that you can do right now? Maybe it's reading an article related to the book as part of the research process and taking notes on the book in room research. Maybe it's just adding one sentence to that book project, and that would be a very, very small and I think easily accomplishable task to do. So when you break things down into its smallest possible component, it doesn't feel so scary to your brain. It seems much more achievable. And then once you get into it, it stops being this like huge project that you have to do, and instead it becomes something that seems suddenly more achievable. And then it kind of starts this cascading effect where it feels like you can then move on to the next thing, then to the next thing, then to the next thing, and you start this kind of chain effect. So that makes this whole process much easier and hopefully gets the ball rolling. So once you start writing that one sentence, and then you'll be like, hey, this is pretty easy. Maybe I'll write the second sentence, and then maybe I'll write the third sentence, and so on and so forth. The fourth thing is to follow your interests. So if you are working on sort of writing something, then and you don't feel like working on that specific project, then you can figure out, ask yourself, what is it that I actually feel like doing? What is it that I'm interested in pursuing right now? And so Lumen, who developed the Zettelkasten system, would basically just work on something differently. And it's said that he never ever got bored because he would always, and he never ever felt like he was ever forced to do something. He was more working on the things that appealed to him naturally at that time. It's very difficult to be working on anything that you're not naturally interested in. If you feel like you have to constantly force yourself to do something, then at some stage you'll start to sort of hate what you're doing and you'll probably burn out as well. Whereas with Lumen, it felt somewhat effortless because he could just shift projects. So he was constantly working on different manuscripts at the same time, which is how he became so prolific. And as you'll see in this quote, that he never actually encountered any mental blockages. So the idea here is really just to take the path of least resistance. So when you're not feeling like you are wanting to work on that specific project, don't fight that feeling. Instead, go with the feeling of whatever it is that you actually want to do. So wherever your interest takes you, and work on that. And then you can go back to whatever the other project you were working on is. So maybe this is not always going to be a realistic approach. Maybe you've got a job, maybe you've got an exam or a paper that you have to submit, in which case you can use the carrot and stick approach. So for me, my sort of carrots are the things that I really love are coffee, sauna, and like eating generally. So these are things that I'll incorporate into my reward system. And so if I haven't done, let's say, 1 hour of productive work, then I won't allow myself to get another coffee until I've done at least that hour of productive work. If I'm scrolling on Facebook, if I'm scrolling through Twitter, whatever, that doesn't count towards that 1 hour. And so I need to be very sort of clear with myself about what that hour of productive work is. And it's good to just think about, what it is that if it's reading, if it's note-taking, whatever the activity is, it's good to be clear about what that productivity or that productive work should look like to you, so that you can actually measure it. And it's obvious that if you're watching Netflix, if you're on Facebook, Instagram, whatever, that time obviously doesn't count. So that's the kind of carrot and stick approach. So I'll deny myself the coffee, and so once I've run out of coffee, and then I'm like, I still haven't done that hour of productive work, I'll kind of that will be for me the stick or the pain that forces me to work on whatever it is that I need to work on. And then once I've done that, then I'll let myself get up, go and get the coffee, come back, and then continue working, and then basically go through that same process and just iterate through that. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you on the next one.